It's March 30th, 2022. Well, the year is a fourth over already. Amazing. Well, I want to get into something today about the situation, what the Biden administration is up to late. Of course, we've seen all of Biden's gaffes, and that's been discussed at length. I don't know. The only thing I can say is that all the people below him, would Harris or Pelosi be any better? I mean, no. So, at any rate, but anyhow. But getting on to the real issues here, there's this new $5.8 trillion budget he's come out with. I mean, it looks like that idea of spending and spending and spending is all this administration can come up with. But there is a little wrinkle in it that's worth discussing a little bit, which is could be precedent setting. It starts off as something that I guess most people out there don't need to worry about, since their income levels and their net wealth is nowhere near that level. But unfortunately, the income tax, when it was first proposed well over 100 years ago, was supposed to just affect the most rich people in the world too, and that turned out to be a little different. So, okay. At any rate, if you like these videos, please subscribe. We need more subscribers. A like helps out with the algorithm, and ring the bell for notifications, and any comments are appreciated. So, yeah, what this tax is it's kind of a wealth tax. I think a straight wealth tax would probably be unconstitutional because of the type of restrictions that was in the original Constitution, and then it was amended to create the income tax at the beginning of the 20th century. But effectively, I don't think it allowed a wealth tax, that amendment. So I think it's still kind of, but what they're doing instead is kind of a tricky thing. What they're doing is taxing the income, the unrealized income that's been accumulated from year to year, as I understand it. Now, what is unclear is exactly what assets this applies to, whether this applies to literally everything or maybe just to securities such as stocks and bonds. And that's one thing that's still a little up in the air. I don't have the details haven't really been put out that much. Yeah, and even if they were, it might be modified considerably by the time it actually would get through Congress. So, if it were to get through Congress. So, that's kind of what we're addressing here on that subject. So, what would happen is, let's say that somebody had a net worth of X at the end of one year, and then a year later, they have an income of Y, where Y is greater than X, okay, whatever that might be. And this has to be for large incomes or large wealth accumulations. But the point is, then they would have to pay a 20% tax, minimum tax, on that difference of Y minus X. Okay, whatever that would be. Okay, so let's say that you had somebody that had $200 million at the beginning, and they had $300 million at the end in terms of stocks, which have not been sold yet. They would have to have pay a tax of $20 million on the difference, okay? But the problem with that is do they actually have $20 million in cash? And the answer is probably not. I mean, just sitting in cash? Well, they might, but if they didn't, they'd have to actually sell assets in order to raise the money to pay the tax. And then the question is, would they then own capital gains tax on what they just sold in addition? So you see how this kind of spirals into something a little worse than they're making it. And the other point is, well, if all these rich people, not just one, but all of them at the same time, are selling all these securities, who's going to buy them? And the answer, I guess maybe institutions or whatever, but the point is that effectively, it's unclear that the general public would have enough inclination or money to do this. And so what you're liable to have is it's going to depress the values of stocks. And as it depresses the values of stocks, what would then happen is, of course, it affects people's 401ks and the performance of pension plans, and et cetera, which would affect a much wider variety of middle class people than the upper rich that this is supposed to be targeting. And the other thing that's bad about it is obviously that it sets a precedent, and they simply put a lower level of income to where this would apply, but one thing, inflation will bring it down. Furthermore, the next financial emergency may also bring it down even further. So this is a very bad precedent, and it really needs to be opposed, and it probably will be. I'm skeptical with all these rich Democrats, the Zuckerbergs and the Bill Gateses and Warren Buffetts and all these people. Uh, they aren't going to like this, I don't think at all. And so I wonder if this isn't going to affect Democrat political contributions in some way, probably to the effect of the contributions happen in return for this tax not happening. And in fact, maybe that's the real purpose here, is to give the AOCs a little bit of a cheer at the same time, actually rake in more campaign payoff. Anyway, that's something to be watching for. The other thing we've been watching is the situation with Ukraine. I'll kind of get that a little bit. It looks like they claim there's been some progress on the negotiation front, although I'm skeptical if they can really reach a deal, given that the Ukrainians don't want to give up any territory, and if Russia comes out of this with no territory, then what was the whole point of the war anyhow? Just to kill a bunch of people and blow up a bunch of buildings and create a lot of refugees? I mean, is that going to be? I mean, it just seems to me that that is going to be a very difficult negotiation. Now, there's a talk that the Russians are pulling back from Kyiv, which may be true. They failed to take it, and so at some point, this urban fighting is costly and not really getting them what they want. So it may well be that they've decided to give up on that front and are going to concentrate on the eastern Ukrainian front. And that it remains to be seen. Or is it just a trick to kind of lure them into off target while they launch some other kind of activity? I kind of could conceive in an optimistic way, if this thing doesn't escalate to something much more dangerous, is that how this will end up is that the Russians will basically conquer certain areas of eastern Ukraine and pull back from Kyiv and reconcentrate their forces in the east. And then essentially this thing will end in a ceasefire, perhaps. Not a real diplomatic agreement on anything other than to quit fighting along certain lines that will be held by both sides at that time, with some promise of future negotiations, which probably are also going to be a flop. And essentially what you end up having is a kind of a stay in like the Korean War, which ended basically with no peace treaty, just a ceasefire along a given demarcation line. But we'll see. The other thing that's kind of interesting on this is the issue of Putin himself. There's been rumors that Putin has been flying to his bunker somewhere in, I guess, in western Ukraine, east of the Ural Mountains. And apparently, during the Soviet period, the Russians they built these rather sophisticated, super hardened bunkers for leadership survival. I guess think of something along the lines of the NORAD headquarters at Cheyenne Mountain. That's sort of a facility, but not so much just for command and control, but for leadership survival. How hardened they really are? Can they take a direct hit from a 300 kiloton nuclear warhead off a Minuteman missile? Can they take a direct hit from a 1.2 megaton gravity bomb off a B-2 bomber? I don't know. But that's the idea of these things. And supposedly Putin and his defense minister and his chief of staff have been going to these locations, perhaps, and that's been suggested by certain news sources, which I don't know the credibility of, and they've been determining this because of apparently the flight patterns of their aircraft transponders going in these directions. Apparently they can follow, but when they get close to these real locations, the transponders are turned off to protect the secrecy of the exact location. That's the story anyhow. And so that could be an ominous situation, obviously, because those are the three people who actually control their nuclear strategic forces. So that's one issue. But the other possibility, this could just be a test of the capability to see what the facility is and make sure it's working, so they don't go there and find out that everything's offline like a lot of other things in their system have been lately. Or it's also possible that this is personal survival. I mean, if there is a risk of a coup, it's possible that they feel that by going to these facilities, they could protect themselves. And also, there's also a possibility, that when you do that, maybe it isn't just those three people. Maybe other key leadership people are being taken to similar facilities, and by keeping them split up and out of circulation, it's kind of hard to plot. Maybe just a thought. And finally, I guess, and so that could be, a way he's trying to protect himself from a coup. So any number of things are possible, or the whole story could be nonsense. But and also, if this is real, I'm sure our intelligence is aware of the idea, and that may increase the tension on leadership and have a intimidating effect, which has kind of been most of what Russia's flexing of nuclear muscles has been about anyhow in this whole fiasco. Um, so, at any rate, I'll be wrapping this up for now. And the links to my social media accounts, well, not the links, but the addresses of them. I don't post the links because I think it just, when you click on a link, you just get a wide variety of stuff. But you can go to those websites and then, use my handle, which is the same on all of them, to get to my social media and subscribe there if you'd like. Okay, I'll wrap this up for now. Until next time.